Okay, let's be honest. Are you just tired of hearing that the world is ending? Well, if you are, this is for you. Today, we're diving into a totally different take on our planet's future, one that's radically hopeful and, more importantly, backed by hard data. We're here to challenge that whole "we're doomed" narrative.
I mean, you hear it constantly, right? It's this nonstop drumbeat of crisis and unstoppable decline. We're told we should be anxious, that the problems are just too huge to fix, and that the future, well, it's looking pretty bleak. And that's a really heavy burden to put on anyone, especially the generations who are going to inherit all this.
But what if, when we actually take a step back and look at the long-term trends, a very different picture starts to emerge? A picture that really pushes back against that story of inevitable doom and maybe, just maybe, points towards real progress and possibility.
And that different story? Well, it comes from the research packed into this book, Not the End of the World, by Dr. Hannah Ritchie. Her main argument is pretty bold. She says we could actually be the very first generation in all of human history to build a truly sustainable planet. And that's not just a nice thought. It's a claim she backs up with a ton of data.
So you're probably wondering, who is this person making such a huge claim? Well, Dr. Hannah Ritchie is a senior researcher at the University of Oxford, and she's also the deputy editor and lead researcher at a place called Our World in Data. Her entire job is to cut through all the noise and just look at what the numbers are actually telling us.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's look at that data, because this is where things get really interesting and where we can start to challenge some of those common fears we all have about the planet just by looking at what the evidence actually shows. Okay, so here's a big one. The myth that our air quality is just constantly getting worse, right? That the air we breathe is getting more polluted everywhere, and it's just this unstoppable consequence of modern life. It's a scary thought for sure, but is it actually true? Well, listen to this quote from Dr. Ritchie. It's pretty powerful. Now look, air pollution is still a huge problem in many parts of the world. Nobody's denying that. But in places that have really taken action, like the UK, the air is literally cleaner than it's been for centuries. What that proves is that this is a solvable problem. It shows us that progress is absolutely possible.
All right, next up, deforestation. This is another one that causes a lot of anxiety, and for good reason. The image we all have in our heads is of chainsaws just buzzing away, speeding up, clearing more and more forest every single year with no end in sight.
But again, the data tells a slightly different story. Don't get me wrong, deforestation is still a really serious issue. But the peak rate of global forest loss, that actually happened way back in the 1980s. Since then, we've managed to slow the rate of destruction down a lot. So no, the problem isn't solved, but we have managed to bend the curve. Okay, what about our own personal impact? Our carbon footprint. There's this feeling, this kind of guilt, that our individual impact is just on this unstoppable upward climb as our lives get more modern. But here's a really crucial distinction to make. While total global emissions are still a huge challenge, the amount of CO2 that's emitted per person, so per capita, has actually been going down in many countries for years. And that's a super important sign. It means we're getting more efficient, we're starting to break the link between a country getting richer and its emissions going up. Okay, so seeing all this progress is pretty encouraging, right? But, and this is a big but, it doesn't mean we can just sit back and relax. Not at all. It means we have to get smarter. It means we have to start focusing our energy on the things that will actually make a real, measurable difference. So let's explore that gap between what we think works and what actually works. I want you to think about it for a second. What actions do you, and most people, believe are the most effective things we can do for the climate? Well, if you look at the surveys, most people point to things like recycling, buying green energy, and changing their light bulbs. And that makes sense. These are the actions we hear about all the time. And look, they're not bad things to do, but their actual impact? It's pretty small when you compare it to some other choices we can make. So if those are the lower impact actions, then where should we be focusing our energy? What does the data say actually has the biggest impact? What's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck in terms of cutting our personal emissions? Okay, get ready for this. Because the difference is, wow, it's pretty stark. The high impact actions can save over a ton of CO2 equivalents per year. So for example, going completely car-free saves about 2.4 tons a year. Now compare that to recycling, which saves just 0.2 tons. See the difference? our effort is a finite resource. This data tells us to focus it where it really matters most. And this whole data-driven focus on what actually works, it leads us to what is maybe the most powerful idea in the entire book. It's a totally new way of thinking about what our goal as a species even is. So we throw the word sustainability around a lot, right? But let's just pause and revisit what it actually means. The definition really has two key parts. Part 1, meet the needs of the people who are alive right now. Part 2, do that without messing things up for future generations so they can meet their needs too. Now, this is where it gets really mind-blowing. This simple definition completely reframes human history. Think about it. No past generation was ever sustainable. Why? Because they all failed at the first part of the definition. For almost all of history, humanity simply couldn't meet the needs of the present. Our generation, we are the very first to have the tools and the wealth to actually meet the needs of everyone on the planet. Our grand challenge is the second half of that definition, to shrink our environmental impact while we do it. Now, it is so important to understand that this is not blind optimism. This is not some prediction that, oh, everything's just going to be fine no matter what we do. It's what Dr. Ritchie calls conditional optimism. It's the belief that a better future is absolutely possible if, and that's the key word, if we do the hard work and make the right choices based on the actual evidence. Because at the end of the day, the data doesn't just move on its own. Progress is never an accident. It's the result of determined people. Scientists, engineers, activists, policymakers, regular citizens, all pushing forward, working to build a better world. The data can show us what's possible, but it's people who actually make it happen. And that leaves us with the book's big central question. Armed with all this data, with a focus on high-impact solutions and with this spirit of conditional optimism, can we really be the first generation to build a truly sustainable planet? A world where everyone can thrive on a planet that's healing? The data suggests it's possible. The rest is up to us.